What have you learned about your defense?
I've said it since the beginning. I love this group. Love what they're about. Love how they go about it. That's probably the biggest thing. They just, you go into a group meeting with them, how they gel. That's something that quite honestly that we've been just okay probably at, but you just walk into a room with this bunch, you kind of get a feel of a tight group, and it shows on the field, carries over. I think on the field, we're playing a lot cleaner football. Maybe not, I don't know how many flash plays you expect to see in the spring sometimes, but we're seeing a lot cleaner, fundamental football, which is really what we we went into this spring trying to do.
I asked Neil this. I'll ask you this too. You're bigger up front, and I guess that was by design. How does that change your defense? And I'm thinking of Jefferson, who he looks the part there. It looks like the guys you got up front are much bigger than you have. Why? What was the reason behind it?
Well, it's as much about what do you define as big? Do you find just weight, length, just overall body type? When we recruit, and I tell the guys, what I try to do is kind of stagger a little bit, have a little bit of everything, but and that's as far as their skill set. Now their body types, I think a lot of times up front that length matters is a lot more than just overall weight. You take it like a big body. Example, Sean Martin, who can probably play any position up front, has enough strength and power to hold the point of contact, but can affect a lot of different things from the three technique out. Quick game throws, shorter quarterbacks, create separation with offensive linemen, has an advantage in the screen game a little bit because he can separate and see. So, you look at those guys, and a guy like Jordan Jefferson, who again can play any position inside, maybe not out at the 5 or a 9 technique. Just the amount of power he has, and then you kind of mix that along the front, and it just keeps you from being kind of pigeonholed into one style of defense. And that's you guys have heard me say that in recruiting, like that's what I never want to do. And when you go find that variety of guys and body types, you can do some different things. So
after 3 years, is this closer to what you want it to look like?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and now you start to the COVID year is an exception, but you're starting to kind of get back on a normal clock with guys, and so you start to again in recruiting stagger, okay, with this guy for 2, this guy for 3, and hopefully, and you start to kind of build your next classes off of what you've got, how long they have, and if you've got. Let's say you got 2 of one of those body types. You probably want to go try to maybe find something a little bit different skill set, and then you start to look at how your league shifts and changes. It's funny you asked that. Me and Coach Jackson. Coach Jackson had a guest in, one of his buddies, in today to watch practice, and we were talking about that very thing with how when he got here, he was. Hey, I'm Big 12. Get my pass rush drills ready, and then here we go. We got 12 and 13 personnel, over half the time, and so it's and the ebbs and flows of college football. I mean, it's cyclical. It goes around, and it all comes back to different styles. And I think I don't know what kind of shift we're about to go through. Even if one just depends on rosters.
If you look at half your games, it required that, including the bowl game. Including the game you're going to play in the opener, probably.
Right.
So, you have to have that answer, right?
When
you got here, you really didn't have any of those body types at all.
Right. 3 years ago, you're right. And so, again, you try to stagger them so that you're able to match personnel as you see it off your schedules. Pay a little bit closer attention of down the road schedules as we go, along with coaching changes, especially within your league, and that kind of allows you to plan a little bit with maybe what you need. So.
terms of planning, your ideas, normally in years past, you'd have a pretty good idea of what you wanted to attack, but with roster changes, just starting for you guys leave, but now you're going to add a bunch too. Do you have an idea of what you can do at this juncture? Or is it still so much in flux?
I think that in the environment that we're in, you try to stay within your base schemes and just adjust as you go. And I think when you realize that, kind of sharpen the focus on what we need to get better at this spring, which was fundamental. Let's play good football. And we've done that. And so, if you can, the non-negotiables we have defensively, effort, communication, physicality, those don't change. And no matter the pieces may change, but the expectations and the standards and the non-negotiables we set for our players, they don't. So you continue to work on those, and you do those. I believe you'll still be pretty good no matter what. So you got to keep that at the forefront. And the pieces are the pieces you adjust with. You can only do what your players can do. So try to just keep that in mind. You lose pieces, you got to go find new ones.
Your thoughts on the Bandit? Coach said the other day he thought Linnell Carr had been your best pass rusher to this point. What do you think of Ian?
I think that Linnell is a lot like at hit in the time frame of development, a lot like what you're seeing with Jordan Jefferson kind of going into this spring. One of our most improved players defensively through the spring. And he has the reason we signed him, he has a natural knack to rush the passer, which is a lot of times such a natural thing, just awareness and their movements and things like that. Now, the tools that they gain while they're here, a lot of that for Linnell has been in his training, is the off season. For his size, he's got to get stronger. I think he's done that because he's got to play stronger. And that allows him to be a better pass rusher because he likes that style of pass rush, a little bit more of a power guy than a finesse guy. But he's had a phenomenal spring, and Jared has too. Jared is more of a speed. He's more of a speed finesse guy, a little bit probably of a better blitzer from in the box. Has a little bit more of a, I always say slippery, but has a little bit more of a knack to kind of knife through protections and run schemes. But Linnell has had a tremendous spring, but it's his second spring. And so again, like Jordan Jefferson, now you're starting to see leaps and bounds of that development. Now guys like that, second spring, you start to see it. And a lot of guys want to hear that now, especially in recruiting. But high school to college, like when you say player development, it takes time. Some guys is quicker than others, but it still takes time to catch up with the game. And when guys have that patience and work toward whatever their goal is they're working toward, and they really, really buy into what you're telling them and what you're teaching them, then you start to see that. And Linnell is a prime example of that. So he's had a great spring.
You mentioned development, and how much did that COVID year set you back? This is really because you're not getting a bunch of ready-made players. You got to develop them. And you missed that cycle, and now this is really the first cycle that you've had the full developmental. Are you seeing a difference in that?
Oh yeah, I think that the guys that Linnell Carr is a prime example. Sean Martin's a prime example. Guys that arrived here, especially the young guys that arrived here. Not a normal freshman year like probably everybody, like me, everybody in this room had in college. But so it's almost like you press pause. And let's just play a season, And we were fortunate we had a good season defensively, that year. We're really good and had some good pieces. But the pieces that were in their second to third year, it's really you just kind of press pause on their development. And even guys that come into their first year, you never really even press start, I guess is the best way to put it. But now that you're starting to again get kind of back on a normal cycle, you start to see that, and that's that's what it takes to especially guys that, like you said, if you do get ready-made, if you get guys that are more ready, then that's awesome. But the majority of them, are not going to be. It's like NFL. I don't know what the percentages are now, but it's somewhere always around 2% of guys that make it to retirement in the NFL. Well, unless they're expanding it or expanding the rosters, those numbers really don't change a whole lot. So, it's the same thing with the ready-made player versus guys that you go recruit and you actually have to develop. And it takes time. It takes time in the off season. It takes time and the investment of the player outside of what's required of them to do that. And then there's an aspect of the coaching side of that. You take coaches that get new jobs every 14 months. Kind of hard to develop anybody. So
did it show up in your depth, and it is showing up now?
Yeah, it is because you as the development goes, you have a lot more quality depth. The talent there may be a little gap in the talent. That may be the reason, but the quality of your depth is better when you have that cycle or two cycle, whatever it is, and you start to develop that. And that's and obviously in the environment we're in, that's more challenging now than it ever has been. But I think you see a lot of guys, Linnell Carr, Sean Martin, guys like that are really, really. You start to see that, and that can't do anything but help.
Jordan, along those lines, it just sounds like, I don't know if this makes sense. Like last year was almost the reset year. Like 2020 was difficult, and last year would have been the year to get some of those guys back on track, like Martin, Torres, probably be 1-2, Linnell. Did you re-strategize at all last year about how to use last year to kind of maybe compensate a little bit for what wasn't there in 2020 and make sure that this year, next year, year after is maximized?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I'm answering your question right. Yeah, no, I mean, it's probably a situation where guys where they hadn't developed to get ready to play that I knew that they wanted to play. I think Linnell probably fits in that category. And then you got guys that, because of that pause, were forced to play that probably weren't ready to play as many snaps as they needed to. Sean Martin probably falls in that category. But that's a lot of times what you see with a younger team. But now once they get through that, now you're going to see the benefits of those reps and that experience in 2022. So I didn't really see it as a reset. I just you're kind of two ends of the spectrum. This group is not ready to play and they don't have to in some positions, and this group's not ready to play and they have to in other positions. So there's a drawback to that in 21, but there's a benefit of that moving forward for guys at both sides of that. I don't know if that answers your question, Mike, but
If I go back to Linnell, the evaluation on him on high school, you said natural skills he had good stuff. His defense that he played on was just kind of unreal. And was he a guy that could stand out among that type of a defense? Was he part of that, or was that defense so good it was kind of a hard thing to see how good you were?
yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of both. And I think going back, what I remember, I can't remember the names of the schools that are in that league in St. Louis, but there's some really some good talent in that league. Particularly that year, there was a couple of offensive tackles. The one game I got to see Linnell live was against one of those guys. I can't remember if the kid went to Missouri or Oklahoma State. I don't really remember. And then the camp that we got to see him at was a mega camp there. I can't remember the name of the school, but it's a smaller, I think it's a D3 school there in St. Louis. And they were able to, it's the first one I've seen like this, they were able to wear pads at the camp, at evaluation camp. And the level of those same kids were there offensive tackle-wise. And you got this kid who's a 6'2", 225-pound outside backer that is really kind of showing out against guys that are obviously bigger, longer, stronger. So that was really what the evaluation come down to. And that defense they had was really good. The one defensive tackle went to Missouri, I think now is at LSU, was a really good player, and they kind of fed off each other in the front of their defense, and they were really, really good, but Linnell, I thought for what his skill set was always kind of played with an edge, played with a little bit of a chip, was kind of an overachiever, but the talent, the skill set for what we were looking for is definitely there. And again, that was 2 years ago, and so now you start to see the development come into, as the game starts to slow down, really starting to pay off this spring for Linnell.
Ask Neil Tuesday. I'll ask you kind of an open-ended question. I asked him what area did he see the most growth. He said secondary. What have you seen there from 14 practices from when they started to where they are now that makes you feel good about them?
Really two things. The leadership side of it has been night and day difference. They talk to each other. They're actually able to correct things, the older ones in a way that they don't come off as like it doesn't come off in a bad way. They respect each other. The young guys respect the old guys and vice versa. And I think that's a really important dynamic. You take two corners. You take Lamp, you take Charles, right? Here's a guy that's played a lot of ball. Here's a kid that's really coming through the development phase and getting ready to be a big time contributor. And they're at this ends of their careers, right? So they can correct each other and communicate in ways on the field, and there's a respect there. And even at safety, it's kind of the same. You got a guy in Marcus Floyd who again will probably play both at some point for us, and Aubrey Burks, who has again a young kid who's learned a year. Now he's coming up in that same phase, and they talk to each other, they communicate, they work well together, and then I think probably the biggest growth to me as a player, just watching him with how he probably maturity more than anything is Dave Smallinger, like just how he's carrying himself on the field. I mean, his skill set's phenomenal. I think we all know that kid can really run, but how he's matured in just really a month and a half time frame on the field has been something that I've really took notice of, and all that together, it's just. And we've talked about, I think we're faster. I think we're more athletic, but our leadership back there has been through 14 practices has been phenomenal, and then your guys in the front, that and we've talked about Lee and how he is. Taj Austin's a guy, and Dante a lot. Dante's always, the guy everybody looks at as a player, but he's really, really kind of matured and grown and has a voice. And Taj Austin the same way, and now and Lee Koba. Now they're all starting to feed off of each other, including those secondary guys. And when you get that, you start to, when they work like that together, you start to, hey, we'll be okay. And
Austin, a guy we're taking for granted. I mean, we talk about Dante, we talk about all the other guys. And here's a guy who came back for another year, didn't have to. What do you see from him? What do you expect from him?
Watch the first play of the Oklahoma game. And that's who Taj is. And he's plays hard, plays physical. When he just like that play, when you put something, and I remember challenging specifically him that week to do something, whatever he's got to do it, and that's just his mentality. And what he's been through and gotten to this point is phenomenal, and he didn't have to come back, and he just wants to play.
I mean, you talk about 5-star recruits and transfer portal. Well, that's a win, getting him back for another year.
Yeah.
In your system, he knows what you want to do. I mean, that's got to count just as much as getting one of those guys, right?
That's right. It does to me. I mean, I'll take Taj Austin any day.